Okay, today we're diving into a scientific paper that honestly sounds like it's straight out of science fiction. It's from the University of Tulsa, and it tackles a truly mind-bending question right at the intersection of quantum physics and, well, biology.
So let's just start with the big, wild wonder question at the heart of all this. What if you could actually heal living cells with nothing more than a photograph? I know, it sounds impossible, right? But a team of researchers designed a super rigorous experiment to see if this could be science facts, not fiction.
All right, so before we get into how they tested this crazy idea, we really need to get our heads around a major shift that's happening in science right now. It's all about how we think about the quantum world.
For the longest time, the general thinking was that all the weird, spooky rules of quantum physics only applied in these super-controlled, ultra-cold lab settings, like temperatures near absolute zero. The warm, messy, complicated world of biology, totally separate. But that old belief is being completely overturned. We're now finding out that quantum effects are happening everywhere, all the time, and yep, even inside of us. And this has kicked off a whole new field called quantum biology. It's basically the study of how living things might be using quantum mechanics to do, well, everything. Think about quantum entanglement, where two particles get linked, and whatever happens to one instantly affects the other, no matter how far apart they are. Quantum biology suggests that nature might be using tricks like that for things like photosynthesis in plants, or even how birds navigate. The idea is that life has been a quantum master for billions of years.
So that brings us right back to the core question that the researchers at the University of Tulsa wanted to explore. If life is already using quantum mechanics, can we, intentionally tap into that for something like healing?
The team, which was led by Dr. Robert Sheaff, they set up an experiment to test a very specific idea. They wanted to see if this device, called the Leela Quantum Bloc, could actually speed up how fast cells heal. Not by touching them, but through what the paper describes as a quantum connection.
Okay, so how in the world do you even begin to test something like that? Well, the team used a double-blind experiment, the gold standard for good science. But the way they did it, their protocol, is where this whole thing gets really, really interesting. Let me walk you through it. So first, they grew human skin cells in petri dishes until they had a nice, full layer. Then they made a standardized wound by just scraping a line through the cells. Now, here's the kicker. They took photos of only the plates that were going to get the treatment. Those photographs, not the cells themselves, were then placed inside the quantum device to be quantized. That's the word they use. Meanwhile, all the actual cells, both treated and control, were kept completely separate in an incubator. Then, over several days, they just took pictures of all the plates to measure how fast the wounds were closing. And they did this whole thing 5 times over a year. And these guys were incredibly precise. I mean, to make sure they were measuring the exact same spot on that healing wound every single time, they literally etched guidelines on the bottom of each dish. This meant they could position the microscope perfectly for every single photo they took. Super rigorous stuff. Now, this right here is probably the most important part of the entire experiment's design. It was double-blind. The scientists who were handling the cells, taking the pictures, and measuring the healing rates, they had absolutely no idea which dishes were the control group and which were the treatment group. Because the treatment was happening remotely to a photograph, there was just no way for any human bias to creep in and mess with the results. Okay, so the stage is set. After all that incredibly careful work, after 5 separate experiments and hundreds of photos, what happened? What did they find when they finally broke the blind and crunched the numbers? The results were, well, they were pretty jaw-dropping. Across the board, in all the experiments, the cells that were connected to the treated photographs healed significantly faster than the ones that were just left alone. And get this, even at the lowest end of the results, the healing rate was sped up by almost 46%. I mean, just on its own, that's a massive difference in a biological study. But it gets even more dramatic. In some of the experimental runs, the treated cells healed a full 100% faster. We're talking twice as fast. The wound was literally closing up in half the time compared to the control group. Just wow. 100% acceleration. That's a number that makes scientists sit up and pay very close attention. So what are the bigger implications here? What does this all mean, according to the researchers who actually did the work? Well, the lead investigator, Dr. Sheaff, he summed it up by saying the results are interesting and warrant further study. He really sees this as a first step,
a proof of concept for looking into what he calls biological entanglement for actual therapeutic uses.
So the main takeaway here is that this isn't the final answer, right? The paper itself calls these preliminary insights. But what it is a really compelling piece of evidence. It suggests that these controlled quantum interactions could one day be used to positively influence biological stuff, like the healing process itself.
And this whole thing just leaves us with a truly provocative question. Could the weirdest, most fundamental rules of physics, things like quantum entanglement, actually be the future of medicine? Now, this one study can't answer that, of course, but what it does is crack open a door to a wild new frontier in healing, one where our very understanding of reality might be the most powerful tool we have.